Good to be with you, Naledi. Look, I mean, I think we're at the beginning of several hours of very high drama here in Washington at the White House. You're seeing, I think, those live pictures as we wait for European leaders to arrive. In fact, just beginning now to arrive at the White House. They're running about 15 minutes late. As you know, they were ensconced with President Volodymyr Zelenskyy at the Ukrainian embassy this morning. Mark Rutte, NATO Secretary General, arriving at the White House now, someone in whom Donald Trump has set tremendous store and with whom he has a very strong relationship. And I think it's important to underscore that there are figures from Europe attending this meeting today with whom Donald Trump has a strong relationship. Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, Giorgia Meloni, the Italian Prime Minister, and also Alexander Stubb, little known on the world stage, but he's the President of Finland, and the two of them have established a deep relationship. I think the other European leaders about to arrive at the White House will be hoping that those figures can help them pull Donald Trump back from the journey that he's taken in the hours since the Alaska summit wrapped up on Friday with President Putin, a journey that has seen him embrace many of Vladimir Putin's positions about the needed requirements for the outcome to this conflict. And the fact that they were gaggling with President Zelenskyy at the Ukrainian embassy here over the last few hours, I think really underscores the urgent nature of this conversation. They want to protect Zelenskyy from coming in for another combative drubbing at the hands of President Trump in the Oval Office. Remember, this will be his first time back in the Oval Office since that made-for-TV event back in February. But they also really want to drill down and understand exactly where Donald Trump now stands, not just in terms of territorial swaps, as the White House puts it, but also in terms of those all-important security guarantees for Ukraine that Europe says have to be at the heart of a lasting, durable and just peace between Russia and Ukraine.
I do want to talk about this. We've spent quite a bit of time here talking about who is flanking the Ukrainian president, but also there's the question around who is going to be there alongside U.S. President Donald Trump. Of course, reports that say J.D. Vance, Vice President, said to be in the room. Any other sort of officials that we're expecting to be there?
Well, it'll definitely be the U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, who has become the main conduit for communication between the Trump administration and Vladimir Putin. It was Witkoff who arranged Friday's summit in Alaska, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who over the weekend, unlike other Trump officials, was kind of trying to put the brakes on the notion that this, what we're witnessing here today, is the negotiation about wrapping things up in Ukraine. Donald Trump is impatient. He wants to get this done and is very much characterizing this as the beginning of the end of the war in Ukraine, provided that Volodymyr Zelenskyy goes along with everything that Vladimir Putin is demanding. The Europeans are here to say, wait a second, this is much more complicated than that. And in Marco Rubio, they may have a bit of an ally because, as I say, on the Sunday television talk programs here, it was Rubio who was saying, hold on a second, we are a long way off from resolving this. We're just at the beginning of a very long process. So I think difficult conversations lie ahead, and much of the outcome is going to depend on what kind of a mood Donald Trump is in.
Yeah, I want to sit with the sort of themes that we expect to come up. And as you say, Simon, saying this could be a very long sort of discussion and obviously a really big room that's needed considering all the names that are going to be in there as this discussion takes place. But key to those themes, Ukraine being part of NATO, and then, of course, the ceding of areas like Donbas, for instance, to Russia as part of the demands that have been made.
Yeah, just on the choreography of this, Naledi, you're absolutely right. The West Wing of the White House is really small. I mean, when you see the White House on television, it looks much bigger than it really is. And you do have to wonder where all of these leaders and their delegations are going to be spending the next 2 or 3 hours. They will be meeting Donald Trump in the East Room, which is that huge room where successive presidents of the United States often hold their press conferences. So plenty of room in there. But where they meet beforehand and where they wait for the opportunity to sit with the American president will be interesting to learn. Look, Vladimir Putin's desire to take control of the whole of the Donbass region of Ukraine at a time when Russia doesn't come close to controlling the whole of the Donbass region is the biggest issue on the table, and the point at which Volodymyr Zelensky absolutely says he cannot agree to what is being demanded of him. And the Europeans will back him on that. And remember that President Zelensky also says you can't have the wider peace negotiation at a time when the war is ongoing. He makes the point, and was making it over the weekend, that there has to be a truce, there has to be a ceasefire. And just overnight, the Russians launched a fresh bombardment on targets across Ukraine, causing multiple deaths, which is sort of grist for Zelensky's mill, pushing back at Donald Trump's argument that there's no point now in looking for a ceasefire, go straight for the full peace negotiations. Zelensky and the Europeans are going to say you can't do that. There needs to be a ceasefire first.
Yeah, of course, we've got an eye on just those visuals right outside of the White House. If you look at the top corner of the screen there, where we started to see some of those officials arriving. But Simon, in true Donald Trump style, he took to social media just yesterday. And this is also a U.S. president who is aware of just how big of a team is making its way to the White House to have this discussion on possibly brokering peace between Russia and Ukraine. But take us through some of those utterances, especially after the Alaska summit.
Yeah, well, I mean, on Saturday, I think there was a turnaround in Donald Trump's thinking. On Friday night, the White House admitted, they conceded that the Alaska summit had not gone the way they expected it to go. While they were calling it constructive, they had no announcements to make. And on Saturday, Donald Trump did a U-turn and gave up on the idea of a ceasefire and gave up on the idea of an immediate second meeting that would bring Putin and Zelensky face to face, and gave up on the idea of more sanctions being applied on Russia, which has led to this rush to Washington, D.C. by European leaders and Zelensky. On social media, President Trump parroted those Russian talking points about no giving back of Crimea to Ukraine and no NATO membership for Russia. Today, he's described this as a big day. He says that he's honored by the fact that so many European leaders are coming to the White House. He's noted that the number of European leaders being present in the building at one time is unprecedented. But he's also sounded quite petulant about the criticism he's received in the media here for the planning of the Alaska summit and how badly it seemed to have gone. He just put a message out within the last hour or so saying, I know exactly what I'm doing and I don't need the advice of people who have been working on all of these conflicts for years and were never able to do a thing to stop them. He says they are stupid people with no common sense, intelligence or understanding, and they only make the current disaster more difficult to fix. That gives you a sense of his mood going into these meetings. There are, of course, many voices here that say the failure of Donald Trump to include seasoned experts who have spent years negotiating with Russian and Ukrainian diplomats who can look at the maps and understand them in detail. Their absence from Donald Trump's inner circle, critics of this White House argue, is a huge gap as he prepares to try and advance the cause of peace in Ukraine.